Hey guys! So today you and I are going to talk about vanilla JavaScript and React. So let's get into it. So the question in question was, Frederick, thank you for all the great videos. You are welcome. I'm happy that you enjoy them. I have a question that I would love your opinion on. How good should I be at vanilla JavaScript before touching React or similar frameworks? Thank you. Well, this is a fairly common question actually. I haven't really addressed it, I think, and mostly it is because I am a elitist bastard who basically to think that I can get away with silly things like writing a reply to the comment and hopefully that's going to make the problem go away. But since I now very well, I kind of have an epiphany now. I realize that if I don't make videos about it, then nobody's gonna find the answer to this question when they Google or YouTube for these things, and therefore the whole spiral starts all over again. So I'm gonna make a video. So the short answer is you don't actually have to learn vanilla JavaScript in order to run React or to work with the frameworks such as React or Vue or Angular or whatever. The thing that I think you should understand if you are new to these things is that there is no difference per se. Like there is a difference. I'm not going to go that far between say something like React and what you call vanilla or what we call vanilla JavaScript. The difference is in what we call JSX, which is the annotation system, the notation system that we use in specifically React now to make these. You've probably seen it, the HTML-like syntax where you could declare your components, and then you have like tags such as h1, or you can create your own tags for like mic tags, something something, etc., etc. That notation system is not vanilla JavaScript, but practically everything else is, because you're not you have to really understand this. There is no difference. Like you are writing vanilla JavaScript if you're working in React. It's just that there are certain syntactical differences, such as the tag system. I think it's almost one of the few things that are different that is not in regular JavaScript. Now the way you check this is very simple. You write code, like JavaScript code, in a file, and then you try to run it in the browser, or in basic. There is a few complexities to that because there are different. Some syntax works in the browser, and some syntax can work in say Node. An example would be the file system modules that you can use in order to access the file system in Node will not work in the browser. But if you create a function that adds two numbers together, that's going to work in both of those environments. And that is exactly how it works. So what I wrote back to the subscriber is that if you start working with React without ever touching vanilla JavaScript, or let's say, I mean, you have to understand, guys, the way that everybody gets started with JavaScript is different. When I started with JavaScript, jQuery was the thing. Everybody was asking about jQuery, and honestly, the problem back in those days was that most people couldn't really tell the difference between jQuery and regular JavaScript. And it didn't really matter because at the end of the day you knew jQuery, and therefore you could do all the things that you needed. And sure, using vanilla JavaScript was on occasion the thing you did, but back in those days the reason why you didn't do it was because the standard browser APIs that was running with JavaScript, they weren't really all that well made. They were really shitty, if I'm going to be completely honest with you, and that's why we had jQuery. Now we move over to React, and the standard is actually kind of nice. I would even go as far as to say that you don't really need jQuery anymore because the browser's API is pretty nice, and that's where this whole discussion of vanilla JavaScript comes in. Now, I also stated to this person that you don't have to worry that you're going to fall behind or something like that, because the reality is that you're going to learn how to write JavaScript code if you use any of the SPA frameworks. I promise you that. The only thing you may not learn is how to do the basics of DOM manipulation, creating elements and so forth through the browser's native APIs. But I also promise you that you're going to learn that sooner or later. There's no discussion that that's going to happen, because if you go through a long and fruitful career in software development and web and doing anything front-end related, there is no way most likely at the very least, that you're going to be able to solve every problem that you have with React, Angular, or Vue, or some SPA framework. There are certain things that you're going to have to do without knowing or without leveraging those frameworks. And I would even go as far as to say that it's going to happen within your first year. And when that happens, it's really not, I mean, then you already most likely have the foundation of the language. You should be able to do loops and variables and etc etc and arrays, whatever you have you in JavaScript. And as I said, it's the same thing when you're not using React. The only real difference is, as I was saying, the JSX syntax and the way that the framework actually works. That's the only thing it's doing for you. Everything else is actually the same as if you were to run it in the browser. So if you learn how to do sort of the same things by just reading up on it and how to do it in vanilla JavaScript, you're going to be fine. Then you're going to learn all the things that you need, right? So what I want you to take away from this is that you don't actually have to study vanilla JavaScript in order to start with React. You can learn JavaScript and React at the same time. It's similar to how if a Ruby person asks, how good do I have to be at Ruby before I start working with Rails? Well, nothing is stopped. Like, you mean, why don't you learn both? Learn both at the same time. I mean, sure, you can do the absolute basics maybe in some type of courses to learn a little bit of the syntax and some loops and stuff like that. But at the end of the day, if your ambition is to get good at this stuff, you might as well pick a framework, because you're going to need one for, say, Ruby and web and so forth, and then use Rails because it is the popular choice. And in JavaScript land, it's a very similar sort of thing. Pick your favorite SPA framework or so forth and learn how to use it, because through learning how to use it, you will still learn how to use JavaScript. It's just that certain things will be abstracted away from you. Those things are there for you when you need them, but it's not something you necessarily need to learn immediately. You're gonna learn it, I promise you, before your career is over, but it doesn't have to be the first stop. Have a great day.